afternoon. My name is Steve Voller. I'm the founder of Visualisation Solutions, and I'm going to be running you through this webinar today, which is all about affordable asset visualization for MATs or multi-academy trusts and schools. There's a slight introduction in terms of the slides that we're going to run through, and after that I'll be taking you into a live demonstration of the software to illustrate some of the principles of asset visualization and the benefits that it can bring. So in today's agenda, we'll look at some of the financial pressures and why they actually require innovative solutions to help you guys do your jobs more efficiently and effectively. The role of highly visual and easy to use software that can help in that respect. And then we'll also take a quick look at some disruptive subscription licensing principles, which if implemented by your software supplier will lead to a reduction in costs and more flexibility for yourselves in terms of using applications. So today's financial pressures and innovative solutions. I think one of the key principles here is in terms of adopting new technology, it's all about simplicity in terms of making sure that users can get the most efficient and effective use from the software solutions that they invest in. And so part and parcel of that is the delivery model, and one of the recent innovations in the sector has been the use of hosted and managed services in the cloud, which reduces per school costs and therefore costs across the whole MAT. Because, for example, you don't need to have the internal IT resources and infrastructure to support the use of these systems, because that's all managed off-site for you. It also means that if you do have IT resources, they can remain focused on other internal priorities, which you're better at delivering than external organisations. And that external software suppliers provide the solutions and the expertise that they're best at. Licensing models has been a big change in terms of how they operate. So they should be now targeting more efficiently the actual expenditure, so that, for example, through software as a service licensing, you pay for what you use, and by implication don't pay for what you don't use. This can be on two bases. One is user subscriptions, ideally through a site level rather than a per user basis, to give you more flexibility, and also a new innovation, data subscriptions, which we'll cover later on in the presentation. And finally, the other area of innovation is obviously in terms of the software capability itself and the use of new technology. This new technology should support greater capability in terms of what software can offer you, but greater capability, but without increased complexity, to make it easy to use and effective for you to get the results that you want. And again, by deploying this new technology, such as open source software, properly licensed, then that again promotes cost savings, both by the software supplier themselves, which can then be passed on to you as a customer. It's important that many of these systems are multi-tenanted, especially for multi-academy trusts. That basically means being able to operate in a secure environment with multiple sites or schools all accessing the system in one place, so that you can, with appropriate security levels, obviously, report across all of the schools within the multi-academy trust. And equally, an individual school can go and look at their data, but they can't see information related to anybody else. And it's important that this capability in terms of multi-tenancy is installed in the system or designed into the system from the outset. It's very difficult for legacy systems to actually implement this on a sort of a post basis, because at that point in time you're trying to add in a functionality which may or may not work efficiently and effectively. So let's look at the role of highly visual and easy to use software. Over time, there's been a shift towards greater visualization in terms of the use of visualization techniques. So you'll be somewhere along this stepping stone or stepping path towards the technological innovation. So most people start off obviously on a manual or paper-based approach, and then over time we've seen the greater adoption of things like spreadsheets or small databases, moving into where a lot of people are these days in terms of what effectively really little more than computerized forms. So they're paper-based forms which are obviously operating in a computer-based system. And a lot of people are actually at that point in time in terms of their use of applications. Moving on from there, we see a greater use of spatially led technology in systems. So this is bringing maps and plans to the floor so that you can use floor plans or site plans combined with the maps as an intelligent background against which you can see information. And the next step on from there is to take that spatially led view and combine it with modelling led data. So, for example, the use of 3D building infrastructure models. And finally, at least in terms of where we are at the moment, exploring the use of virtual environments such as augmented reality and virtual reality. And ideally, moving through time, obviously software suppliers need to be keeping up to date with this new technology, otherwise it's very easy to get left behind. And we've all seen sort of big names in the past that were very dominant in sectors slowly disappear as they haven't been able to adopt to shifts in technology. So for example, on the computing side of things, you may have heard of organisations such as Wang and Amstrad in the past, who basically suffered as technology moved forward. The market changed in terms of its expectations, and those big names died down. In the consumer side of things, you may be probably familiar with an organisation called Blockbuster Video, again very successful at one point in time. But the delivery mechanism through which people wanted to access that material changed, moving predominantly online. Blockbuster didn't keep up and therefore effectively faded out of the business sector entirely. So with this shift to greater visualization, it's very important that organisations can keep up to date with it. Just a matter of interest from our Tutties perspective, we're at the spatially led and spatial modelling side of things, with a new project starting to look at the use of augmented reality, and not for high level enterprise level organisations with loads of IT resources and arguably very large budgets, but specifically designed for use in the education sector. So let's take a quick look at disruptive subscription licensing. This should mean that you can get a quicker and better return on the investment that you're making in software. It's a subscription-based model. It should be transparent and easy to understand, and as I said before, you should be able to pay for what you use. Ideally, there are no long-term tie-ins, especially given the changes taking place in the education sector at the moment. So why tie yourself into a 3 or 5 year deal, which with potentially penalties for coming out of that if, for example, you're reorganising your schools or reorganising your mats and therefore circumstances change. And as we've also seen, there's rapid technology changes taking place in the marketplace, and ideally you should leave yourselves open to considering what's going on in the market in a year or 2 years' time. We believe that the right approach is a school level type or mat level type licensing rather than individual user-based licensing, because that promotes easier use of the software to all staff as needed. And given the move to mobile working, mobile data capability should be included as part and parcel of the software license. The other innovation that we're introducing is more of a data as a service type model. So conceptually, this is very similar to a mobile phone contract in that rather than paying sort of subscription licensing based on users or size of site, you're actually paying it based on the amount of data that you're using up in the cloud. And we're introducing this as a new innovation, particularly at these smaller schools, i.e. those with less than 100 pupils at the moment. And it's based on a small entry-level fee, plus obviously the ongoing data usage costs. This, we think, opens up the opportunity for smaller primary schools, for example, to move into the adoption of software solutions, which previously have been too expensive or unaffordable for them to actually adopt. Finally, there should be no or low-cost implementation and training costs associated with getting these systems up and running, just again to help promote the use of the application sooner rather than later. And taking a combination of all of these things together with the technology that we're adopting, for example, which in turn facilitates cost savings for us, which we're passing on to you as consumers of the software, we think that the average savings are turning out for a school anywhere from 40% to 90% cost savings on an annual basis over what you may be paying at the moment. So that's set the scene. So now let's have a look at some of the software itself so you can actually see what this sort of move towards visualization actually involves and how you can actually use the systems to report on and view and manage information in a very effective way. Okay, so we've now logged into the actual system itself. So let's have a quick look at some of the principles to demonstrate the benefits of using asset visualization. This isn't going to be a full demonstration of the capabilities of the system, we're just focusing on the visual aspects. So we're immediately presented by this map-based view where we can see the sites that we're responsible for managing. So these are multiple schools in a multi-academy trust. Each school can access its own data, but not necessarily anybody else's unless they're given the rights to do that. But as a senior manager, for example, in the actual trust itself, you could do reporting and analysis across one or all of the schools. So let's drill down into the detail of one of these actual sites. So we can go into a plan-based view, looking at the floor plans, for example, or a site plan, or we can go into the map-based view. So let's just start off with the map-based view. So as we go in, we can see the buildings that we're responsible for maintaining, and although the floor plan based view will become more important in terms of managing obviously the internals of the buildings that we're responsible for looking after, but the map based view or a site plan based view gives us also a perception of the extent of the estate that we're responsible for maintaining. So we can see the buildings themselves and also the other estate around the grounds that we're actually trying to look after. And that's important. For example, here we might have information about the driveway. Maybe there are issues there that we want to record, which obviously aren't going to be available on the floor plan. So in this perspective, we can have defects related to the driveway, which we're maintaining and storing on the system itself. And then maybe other information which isn't specifically related to buildings, but which we want to maintain through the system. So for example, over here we have a cluster of vehicle records where we're maintaining information about, for example, MOTs, insurance expiry dates and so on. And then down here we have a cluster of markers which represent different types of compliance inspections which are going to be taking place across the school estate. So having displayed all the information there, it's relatively easy to query back information more specifically that we're interested in looking at. So we've got this filter. We can select, for example, a type of information that we want to restrict it by. So let's say defects. We could select information related to a particular type of defect, the asset it's affecting or its cost, or alternatively we can query back everything onto the site. So let's do that. So we've now restricted it to just the defect information. So the coloured icons here represent the status of the defect. So green means they're completed, red means they're outstanding, so they're not being dealt with, and the sort of yellow-orange ones here basically mean they're in progress. So immediately we can see visually and very easily and intuitively the actual status of the defects that we're trying to manage across the site as a whole. From this view, we could select to an asset list. So it's going to display the information in the from a list-based perspective. You can see that you can take photographs and associate those with the markers. So we can click on one of those, it goes to the marker and then brings up the information associated with it. And then within here, there's a window which stores more information, and you can upload documents and photographs, etc., associated with that asset or that issue. And this list scales depending on what information you're actually looking at in the main map-based view. So having looked at that, what else can we do with this in terms of query capability? Because we're operating on a map, we might want to do a spatial search. So we've got one here that we've previously saved, which is looking at sort of the entrance and reception area there. So we can operate that. And as you can see, we've created this area that we're interested in querying, and it's only going to display the assets in this case which are located within that area. So this means that we've got complete flexibility to do queries across parts or all of buildings, but also importantly to query parts or all of the estate which are in the vicinity of or outside the actual buildings themselves. So much more flexibility than we might usually have through this sort of asset system. In addition to this, what we can also display is information related to activities that are taking place across the site. So these are inspection activities which are taking place on these markers that we're displaying here. If we did a wider query, then this list would obviously be much longer. So that's one very simple view based of that. So let's now have a look at a plan-based view. So here we have a floor plan which has been loaded into the system, which is obviously operating through the browser itself. There may be on some of the floor plans that get loaded in different levels of detail which you can then have a look at and query, and then use that as the background information against which you're going to associate details. So on here by room now, we've got clusters of assets here, for example, representing ICT assets. We've got our defects, and we've got other types of asset information related to this particular site, including, for example, booking requests, which are these yellow areas showing when rooms are actually booked out for use by internal or external organisations. So you can see here that you've now got a very detailed representation of where assets or where issues are located across your estate. So that's the very simple terms of visualisation aspect in terms of the use of the plans and the maps. In terms of reporting, it's good to have a set of standard reports included within the actual system itself. So we have an inspections dashboard, which is visually presented using colours to indicate the different status of different types of inspections which have been scheduled across the system itself. So these are all inspection records. Red are overdue, so they should have started but haven't. Orange are in progress, and then green mean they've actually been completed. And then we can go into more details on the actual individual inspections if we wanted to, in terms of seeing what's actually due in the future. So if we looked at lighting inspections here, set them to underway, then these are the areas of the school which are going to be subject to a lighting inspection, with each individual asset listed down on the left hand side here. And we can go, if we want to check and verify these details, we can skip across to the map based view and it will query that information back onto the map. We can see it's this particular asset here. So that's the visualization aspect in terms of inspections. And then from a reporting perspective, we can go into a dashboard. This can report across all sites. So if we do that, it's going to summarize the defects in this example by active defects across all the school sites that are responsible for maintaining. Or we could select an individual site, such as the one we were just looking at, and then it refreshes itself to show those details. I've got a couple of simple bar charts here, or one simple bar chart being displayed in a pie chart to the right. We can see a count here of the number of records, and from there we can drill down to a detailed report. And again, if you actually want to see the details about any of these, you can click on the link and it will skip across to the map or plan and then query back the information related to that marker. So what we're doing here at the moment is looking at the drill down approach. There's also a standard set of reports which can start off on a very sort of traditional text-based approach. So if we look at this defects report, just query back a modified version. So we've got a standard list here which we can sort and we can filter based on what information we actually want to see. But because we're sort of focusing on the visualization today, one of the interesting things you can do in here, where we've got the estimated cost, for example, is to present that information in a different way. So we might be more interested in terms of seeing the cells coloured by their actual costs. This makes it much easier to see from a visualization perspective the costs of one particular defect versus others. And if we were to further sort this, then we've got that information there at the bottom end. Let's just sort it the other way around. So now we've got the most expensive at the top, and you can see how the shading varies depending on the cost of the actual defects that we're looking at. So that's one way of actually presenting that information. Having got this information in text-based form, we might want to present that in a graph or a bar chart. So let's just quickly change the presentation. So we've now got a bar chart working across multiple schools with details of the total count of the number of defect issues. What we might want to do is look at that in more detail. So let's look at the types of issues that are coming in by school. So you can now see we've got information related to each individual school on a comparison basis based on the type of issues that they're experiencing. In addition to doing that, we could change that view, and instead of having it being displayed on a bar chart, change it to, for example, a heat map. So in this area, the size of the heat area represents the relative cost. So Chestnut Avenue School has estimated costs of £5,745 in this example. Brighton Academy has much fewer, and then St Catherine's at the top here has even more priorities associated with it. So that gives you a good indication of the relative costs of things, and it also indicates how you can actually present information in a different way and reanalyze and drill down into more details depending on what you're trying to achieve. The other aspect in terms of visualization, in terms of the inspections that were taking place, is to see things on a calendar-based view. So here we can see for this month which activities haven't started yet, but what should have done. So we've got these two here, these ones in red. This one's in progress, this yellow-orange one. and then the green one is already completed, so that's off and away. And you can very easily skip through the months to see what's coming up in months in the future as well. So these ones haven't actually been started yet because they're in May 2017. Just a couple of final examples in terms of how you can also present information. We've got something called a defect text cloud. So here we can report across all sites, or we can select an individual school. So let's select that one, and it very quickly and visually shows us where the majority of the issues are that we're currently confronting. So the majority of our issues at the moment are related to broken assets of some description. We can then drill down from there to more detail to see the individual issues which are experiencing that problem. And you'll see if we change it to all sites that it brings in other information. So these statuses are completely set up and definable within the system, so you can do your own analysis based on what you're recording in terms of information coming into the solution itself. And finally, you've seen how we've now got this dashboard type approach, how we can present information on the map and associate things like photographs with the information that we're recording. The other thing you're able to do is obviously to upload and associate things like videos. So one aspect which is very useful, which is predominantly growing in the marketplace at the moment, is the use of, for example, drones to actually undertake things like roof inspections. So this is an example of a school where a survey was done using a drone. So this image comes from the drone itself, and as you can see, you're able to sort of zoom in to quite a high level of detail to actually see information related to the physical condition of the roof. And conducting roof inspections, for example, by drone is considerably cheaper and quicker than doing it through traditional methods in terms of using ladders and scaffolding, etc. So this is a very quick overview of the use of AltaSites and some of the highly visual aspects that we use to help people understand and manage the information they're responsible for maintaining. We hope you found this very interesting and informative, and look forward to seeing you online shortly. Thank you.